Gentlemen, ladies, I've got to move on. For our panel, we're just going to take a little turn, but still keep on in that vein. In 2015, are women respected as equals in the workforce as men? In 2015, have we matured as a society, meaning specifically in Bermuda, to respect women as equals in the work field?
No, we have not. Quick answer. I think the answer is just no. I think there are times in your career as a woman where you may be seen as an equal, and particularly very early in your career and at the entry level. I think actually in the very, very early years, often women are exceeding men in education and in entry-level roles. But as you progress through the workforce, I think you see that gap widen, and particularly as you get into senior management roles. And of course, there are so many theories as to why that is, and I don't think we'll get into all of them tonight. But yes, there's a huge gender gap, and it gets bigger as you get higher.
Just to echo Jesse, when you look specifically at the legal profession, and by no means is this an indictment on the legal profession, but coming out of law school, men and women are on equal footing, about 50%. And you look at the Bermuda bar statistics, and they're quite high. But when you look at the upper echelons of directors or even the bench, the stats are very skewed, about 18% locally and also internationally, looking at the US, Canada, and the UK. But that's not unique to the legal profession. It's the same in the accounting profession and other areas. I think if there was parity between the sexes, issues such as maternity leave, equal pay, flexi working hours would be addressed, and they would be incorporated into corporate culture. But as of now, we are making strides. About 62 years ago, we had the first female called to the Bermuda bar, but there are more strides that do need to be made and hopefully are being made.
Kim, you mentioned flexi time. Let's go some detail of what you think flexi time should look like in 2015, and in fact, why should it be fair?
Sure. Flexi time, typically your workday is 9 to 5. Flexi time may start a little bit later in the day because as women, we have other issues, not negative issues or positive issues, just other issues that we have to take care of, such as child rearing, that work-life balance that we're always seeking to strike. So perhaps starting the day a bit later and ending the day later. Also, the ability to use remote access to log on so that you're still in real time interfacing with your clients or your work, but the ability to not actually be in the office is presented through remote access. And there are many companies that are introducing that, but those are a couple other avenues that could be pursued.
So, Christy?
Thanks. So I agree with what a lot has been said. I've been doing a lot of research in this space, I think, for the last 10 years, it feels like. And one interesting thing is we used to talk about women's preferences as very unique. And what we're seeing is that there's really a merging of desires across genders, across races, and across generations. So really, like, we see men wanting more time at home and wanting more flexibility. We see that also that millennials are said to really care about autonomy and being results-driven, not presence-driven. But we're seeing that older generations care about that as well when they're thinking about potentially transitioning to part-time loads on the back end of their careers. So I really think what Kim's talking about doesn't just make sense for women. I think it'll be one stepping stone, but I think it makes smart talent sense. So really smart organizations that are thinking about how to develop the next generation of leaders and how to retain their critical talent will be looking at these women's strategies as strategies for everyone.
Remember, gentlemen, in our feed from the audience, they would like to hear how the men answer this question.
Yeah, I was trying to jump in on that. Next.
I view it a little bit different from the women panelists. I think women somewhat in certain organizations and in certain places have arrived, and I think they are well respected. From where I operate within the public service, there are women that are permanent secretaries, there are women who are department heads, and they are equally and as well respected as the men that had those posts prior to them. But if I could take it from a whole different angle and look at the family angle, the head of my family has always been a woman. Starting from my granny right down to my mother, that has always been the rock of my family. So I have always had a deep appreciation and respect for the leadership roles that women play in the home, and I've translated that to respect the roles that women play in organizations and institutions. But women are part of a group of minorities. Just saying, have women arrived, then we can just say, as young black leaders arrived. And where do we find ourselves? So I think that there has been huge achievements for women. When you look at, there are books out there say as 100 women in leadership in Bermuda and all sorts, and you can highlight their achievements. In certain countries, you don't see that. So I think Bermuda is far more ahead than a lot of our Caribbean counterparts when it comes to women in leadership roles. In addition to that, I think that there is an avenue and a space in Bermuda now where you're respected based on what you can actually bring to the table.
Very interesting dynamic that Jason's brought to the table. He actually has a perspective, it's a little different from the perspective that we've seen from women, but he said from his world, from the BPSU, from a government perspective, it has a very high representation of women across the board in terms of leadership. He speaks his own personal experience, and he says in his world, he sees women as the epicenter of leadership. Is there a different model then in the private sector when it comes to women in leadership, or a different model altogether that he may not see or we may not see, which puts women at a professional deficit? Or are there other components? Because a woman could still lead, but have to deal with critical issues within her leading paradigm that causes her an unequal footing. So just wanted to throw a little dynamic in there just to give us some food for thought.
I guess I'll pick up that bomb. So, first of all, I like to just break it up a little bit. Industry, for me, that's insurance and reinsurance. Yeah, you have to break it. You have to take each company on its own merit. Yeah, you can't lump the whole industry together and say the industry is this, because that's not true for every company. Some companies are better than others with regards to the treatment of women and how they view them. It's different. The culture from one company to the next could be radically different. So I just want to state that. The other thing is, my wife works in the same industry as I do, so it is an issue that's near and dear to my heart, right? That there is a discrepancy in pay. That's a fact. It's not just in Bermuda, it's global. Women tend to get 85 cents, I think it's 85 cents lately now on the dollar. Well, it depends on the industry. I read a recent report about 2 weeks ago that in some industries, it could be as low as 65 cents, depending on what field you're in. So, for example, financial planning, women get paid even worse. Ironically enough, it's financial planning. So they get like 65 cents on the dollar to a male counterpart who's doing the exact same job, right? So that's that. The other thing that came out in the study, which was interesting, is any pay structure that has some sort of bonus plan or merit-based pay, women tend to not do as well. And again, I'm speaking generally, right? It's different from company to company. But these are the realities that exist. When it is subjective, when I say, I'm going to pay Chan, X dollars, and I'll pay a bright, young, talented lawyer her X minus 20. Just because, right? It's subjective. And so as long as we have, pieces like that in place, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that a good education doesn't necessarily make a good leader. So things like integrity will tackle issues like that, and things like compassion and empathy. But,
okay, really quickly, we've gone to the males. Let's jump back to our female panelists. We understand that the veneer of equality is there. When it comes to issues of pay, performance-based pay particularly, also when we're talking about benefits, where are the challenges, or are there challenges as it relates to that for females in the work environment? We're talking specifically now for Bermuda.
And so I'll speak specifically about benefits, and in particular maternity leave. I have 2 children, and I've worked, from obviously before they were born, and have continued to work since then. And I took maternity leave twice for them. But believe it or not, there was another person involved in making those 2 babies.
Is that so?
That is
Yes.
It's downright shocking.
But did he take leave? No, we were living in London at the time, and he got 2 weeks of paternity leave, paid paternity leave in London. But why is it that after the birth and maybe, some short time early on after having a baby, that it's entirely a woman's issue that we've become parents? Why is it that it's not just a difference between parents and non-parents? This is not a woman's issue, this is a parent's issue. So until parents' benefits are the same for men and women, we will continue to see inequality and a gender gap that grows after people have children.
Christy, I'd like to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. So I really believe that work-life policies and flexibility policies and leave policies need to remove gender from the equation as much as possible. And what we see for women in the workforce, studies have also shown that the trade-offs that they face are greater. They're still doing the majority of the child rearing, the majority of the caretaking for elder parents, the majority of the housework. And therefore, we look at the competing priorities, and they're a lot greater, which is setting them up to not succeed as well in the workforce. Now, as much as we can try to equalize policies, parental leave, not just maternal leave, and really elevate the role of men in the household as well as women, I think that would be a great advancement as we look at addressing these obstacles.
Excellent. Guys, I'm going to go.
I'll be brief. Well, one, in terms of in Bermuda, women overtook males in terms of median income a couple of years ago. And so from purely income perspective, women have made some progress. Doesn't speak to the upper echelons, as was already mentioned, but certainly as a group, they have made progress. I think we have a societal challenge as well. And part of that challenge is that as a male tends to move up the corporate ladder, the more attractive he is as a mate. The more a woman moves up the ladder, the less attractive she becomes. So that's a societal challenge, how we view people in leadership, particularly women.
So you're saying if a man moves up, he's looking as a partner. If a woman moves up, she's looked at as a threat.
Yes.
Wow. Interesting. Well, as the old timers say, you've put us on a very interesting wicket.
I'm just going by research.
Research-driven comment. Let's go now into the issue of race. Are white male leadership models viewed as more superior than the black model, or for the levels of success? Be more succinct. There is a belief that white male leaders are more respected in business and in our community than their black or their counterparts across the spectrum, including females in this case. Is that a figment of someone's imagination? Is that true? What are we seeing as it relates to race and the iconic standard of years gone by?
Well, I picked up the last one.
So I think the data tells us, obviously the empirical evidence is that most companies, be they Fortune 100, 500, whatever they are, FTSE 100, 500, they're led by white males. But the data tells us that diverse teams make better decisions than homogenous teams or one individual. And the reason is this. It's not that the diverse team sits around a campfire holding hands singing Kumbaya because they're all together, singing in the same accord. Diverse teams represent people of diverse backgrounds, and diverse backgrounds bring diverse perspectives and disagreement and dissent. And what that means is that people put out an idea. If the idea is not a good idea, someone from a different perspective will say, I don't think that's a good idea. So ideas are challenged, they're modified, and if they're really bad ideas, they're dropped. So the data tells us that although what we see is that the leadership is predominantly male and predominantly white, the data tells us that that's not a good thing. And so a symposium like this, where we're discussing diversity in leadership, is very important because we need to increase the diversity in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, national background, and sexual orientation, as far as I'm concerned.